Ulysses E. Campbell, and this is Two Guys and a Comic Book.
Just this museum, if you ever get a chance, check out the Geppies Entertainment Museum. We're loving our time here.
Hey, but you know, we got to go to a break, and we've got our first guest that we need to bring on, so you stay right where you are, don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back.
In this small brick house on Amity Street in Baltimore, Maryland, lived Edgar Allan Poe. Residing here in his youth, it was a time in his life when his literary career took form and began to transition from poetry to short stories. Many of his works written here achieved critical acclaim, and his life as a writer began to take flight. Edgar's family had its roots in Baltimore. His great-great-grandparents came to the city from Ireland in 1755, and his grandfather, David Poe, fought in the American Revolution, becoming friends with George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette. Although born in Boston, Edgar spent many years in Baltimore and had numerous associations here. It was in Baltimore that Edgar launched his literary career, and here that his mysterious death occurred. Several blocks east from this house, Edgar Allan Poe still resides in Baltimore in the Westminster Church Burying Ground, alongside his wife and family. In the late 1820s, Edgar lived off and on in Baltimore with his cousins. Following an unsuccessful term at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and a broken relationship with his foster father, John Allen of Richmond, Virginia, Edgar returned to Baltimore in the spring of 1831 and moved in with his aunt, Maria Clem, in East Baltimore. On May 6, 1831, Edgar wrote to the owner of the Baltimore Gazette and Daily Advertiser looking for a job. In that letter, he stated that he was very anxious to remain and settle himself in Baltimore and no longer looked upon Richmond as his place of residence. Late in 1832 or early 1833, Maria Clem moved her household, including Edgar, from East Baltimore to this newly developed area outside the city limits. In its day, this area was considered the countryside. This little brick house on Amity Street was once a duplex. The two homes were separated by an arched doorway which led to a narrow passageway between them. The house had been built around 1830 for Charles Clausen. Maria Clem rented this house primarily with money from her mother's Revolutionary War widow's pension. Maria Clem's household included 5 people: herself, her ailing mother Elizabeth Cairns Poe, her daughter, and Edgar's future wife, Virginia Eliza Clem, her son Henry, and her nephew Edgar Allan Poe, who was now 23 years old when they moved into the house.
Welcome back. We are here at Geppies Entertainment Museum in Baltimore's Inner Harbor at Camden Station, and Patrick and I are joined for this segment by Andy Hirschberger. Andy is the Associate Curator here at Geppies. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in the place that I work.
Well, this is a fabulous place that you work.
I would love to work here.
Oh, thank you. Ask you. We have applications out
Oh, make sure you get me one of those.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, you know, there was a game that I used to play called Cosmic Wimp Out. My friends told me that I used to draw strength from comic books when we played that game.
Lots of firsts, lots of key issues.
Definitely.
Watchmen #1, the miniseries that was voted by Time as one of the top 100 novels of the 20th century, and the comic book. In Japan, it would probably be #1, but they have a little bit of a different attitude towards graphic novels, a little bit more, as they say, in Japan, graphic novels are considered art. In America, they are still struggling to be given their proper due.
That is true.
Well, but don't you think that that's changing a little bit? I mean, right now we're enjoying the incredible, unprecedented success of the Avengers, which of course is based on a comic book property.
Well, the Avengers has been a cash cow. It's doing very well. Marvel has managed to create a serialized film, which is very impressive considering serials have been out of favor for years, but now they're coming back. They created their own universe, much like the comic universe of Marvel when it first started. Stan Lee created this interconnected world where you could read Fantastic Four #3 and know that it was affecting Amazing Spider-Man #5, and just the way everything merged. And now they're doing that with movies.
Yes.
And it's really great. And of course, DC has been very successful with the Batman franchise.
Yes.
And we're seeing what they're saying is a golden age for comic fans in the films. Now, I beg to differ because I say there was also a golden age in the 40s with the movie serials, ironically
Quite
bringing us
true.
back
Sure.
to here. They say the Captain Marvel movie series is one of the best ever made. The guy who could do that was practically a martial artist, does all these backflips and all sorts of crazy stuff that Sonny Chiba would later very popular
Yeah.
later on.
Now, was that Tom Tyler?
That was Tom Tyler.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
You know, well, I tell you what, I'm a big fan of all those old serials. And Captain Marvel, I'm so delighted that you mentioned that one, because that is one of the, that holds up to this day. If you
Yes.
haven't seen it, young man, you should take a look at it.
I've seen a little bit, but I'm still trying to get acquainted to that material. Awesome stuff. It's just amazing to see that they were able to do that type of special effects during that time.
Well, you know, the flying scenes, as I recall, they used there was a dummy on wires that they would use for that, if I'm not mistaken.
That's generally the way they would have people fly back then. Dummies on wires. You could see it in a lot of movies. The Rocket Man serials, you'll see the guy like
He was
this.
a little dummier than Captain Marvel did.
It was a lot dummier.
Yeah.
There was also lots of great tricks. Another comic to movie adaptation serialized is Flash Gordon,
Yes.
which is even today.
Granddaddy of them all.
Star Wars Flash Gordon, and they say George Lucas actually wanted to buy that and make that movie instead.
Thank heavens he wasn't able to get the rights.
That's true. That's true.
But that would have been cool to see too, I have
And
to say.
hopefully would have kept Queen as the soundtrack.
You didn't like Queen, did you?
I actually consider that the greatest soundtrack album of all time, and I own it
Yes.
in 4 different versions. I own it on tape, LP, and I have 2 CDs of it.
Oh,
And I'm not
man.
I'm going in after him. How's that? The Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller graphic novel
Yes.
that was so instrumental in transforming Batman from the 60s campy, lovable character that's great in its own right, back into the Bronson-esque, angst-riddled vigilante that we've come to
Yes.
love. It's the childhood of us all in
Yes.
one spot.
I'm out of breath just listening to it. And the childhood of us all is absolutely right. I mean, you know, one of my favorites was the Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Oh yeah,
I was like, I remember that.
We have a bunch of people coming in and showing how the African American experience influences comics and popular culture. It's going to be a nice companion piece for Baltimore because, you know, the Reginald Lewis Museum is up the street. There's a lot of history in Baltimore. We have the
Definitely.
Underground Railroad in Baltimore. And it's a way to just show, you know, we have our comic room which shows one aspect of culture.
Yes.
This is another aspect of culture. It's enriching, exciting to see where
Definitely.
things came from.
And we have the Baltimore Heroes
Yes,
room right next door,
Baltimore
which
Heroes.
was
Took it right
amazing
out of
for me
my
to see. I just worked with Cal Ripken Jr. on a commercial about a couple of weeks ago, and seeing his jersey and just some of these other Baltimore heroes. John Waters' Crybaby jacket I saw up there. It's
That
just
you
an
didn't know
amazing
all those
museum.
people were from Baltimore.
No, I
did you?
didn't. No, I didn't. It's just, wow, is all I can say. I'm kind of speechless, so if you'll excuse me, I'm just enjoying everything I'm looking at right now.
Jeppy's is really interested in education. We don't want, you know, just to show you the fun. We want you to ponder and think about it. And one of the best ways we felt to do this was we have this room filled with comics. And what's
Yes.
the thing when you see stuff behind glass that you most want to do? Touch it.
Yes, yes.
So what we did is we built 3 interactive kiosks in the comic room where you can read 6 different titles that are in the museum.
Wow.
Action Comics #1, you can get your hands on it, you can read it. Superman #1, you can read it. Detective 27, you can read it.
Really?
Fantastic Four #1, you can read it. Amazing Fantasy #15, you can read it. And Donald Duck finds Pirate Gold because as people who are of the comic golden age will tell you, if there was one superhero that beat them all, it was Captain Marvel, and if there was one character that could trump him, it was Donald Duck.
Well, I think I have a few things I want to do after we're done taping. I didn't even know that. That is awesome. I see the buttons that you can turn, I guess, some of these spindles around to see some of these other books.
We have our rotating
Amazing.
cases filled with the CGC comics. One of the things about comics that's very interesting is it's like a lot of antiques. It has an appreciable difference in value depending on
Yes.
the condition.
Yes.
Like, for example, if I have a Ming Dynasty vase with a big crack in it, it's not going to be worth as much as a Ming Dynasty vase that doesn't. Where a comic book is even more detail-oriented, because if I have a comic book with a little bit of a staple irregularity, that's a lot different than a comic book that's evenly stable.
Exactly.
And that can make the difference between a few pennies to millions of dollars.
Exactly. If you look on eBay and you were to buy a comic book, you want to make sure that it's in immaculate condition if you're going to be spending such top dollar for that particular issue. I know for myself, I'm always looking and watching out for my family and friends that pull open my long boxes to pull out certain issues. Be careful with that, because just the little slightest crease or edging could throw the value of that book off. But at the same time, I do want them to enjoy the book, so that way they can get the same love and appreciation that I do. So it's just amazing looking at this stuff. One of the questions I have, being that I'm of the old hardbound copy, and having taken it off the newsstand, and now we've gone into graphic novels, and comic books are now in bookstores like Barnes and Noble's, Borders. Now with everybody having tablets in the digital age, and one of my fears as a comic book fan is people won't know the joy. And I used to smell the comic book as soon as I would pick it up on Wednesday.
It's a tactile
There's such a experience with comic books for me.
I never feel that the comic book as a physical medium will go out of style. People like tablets, they like the immediacy of that, but there's a completely different feel between holding the tablet and reading a book and reading a physical book. Sometimes if it's something you're not that interested in, you'll be like, okay, I've got the new Dean Koontz novel, I don't need to own that paperback, I would like to skim that on the airplane. But you then say, I've got the new Amazing Fantasy reissue. I don't want to experience that just in the tablet. I want that hand.
Yeah.
I want that
There's something
physical
about it.
medium.
Oh, yeah.
It's like one of the things with music that now that CDs have become obsolete, people are discovering that records have suddenly become popular, and people don't want to go to these MP3s completely. They want a physical medium. There's something about having a tangible thing to keep this stuff going. Now, all this stuff is transitory, tastes change, but the comic books will never go. I think even if they transform the way they are now, that can happen. But it's rooted in a lot of pleasantry. And it might be that they just become trade paperbacks. It might be they withstand the digital conversion.
Well, the other thing is, your tablet will never be worth $1 million just because you're looking at Action Comics on it. So,
Unless, of course, you can get little iconic game pieces for an interactive game that you can sell online for $50. Like, I got the Sword of Superman. It's like, $1 million.
As a writer creator, I love the digital format in that it helps me reach a wider audience. But as a fan, there's just nothing like having that hardbound copy. And my wife even had a discussion. My wife and I had a discussion about collectability. Is that going to erase, collectability? Because, like you were saying, you just can't, have, unless you're giving a MP3 or whatever, that hard file. You can't. There's nothing like that from a digital comic book. So,
we were talking about the value of comics a moment ago.
Yeah.
Yes, the Overstreet Price Guide is the definitive price guide for comic books.
Okay.
The Overstreet Price Guide, we have original artwork in the covers. This is the book that basically launched the comic book collecting, not craze, but appreciation.
Yes.
It was a forerunner. It saw that people were trading on their youth. They were going back to comics. People were collecting them, and they said, well, we got something here. Let's make a book that shows what things were worth. And to show how effective this book has been in valuing a comic book from the 1930s as opposed to like a movie book from the 30s, which I could go to the store and buy for probably $10. Action Comics was selling for less than $1,000 when that book first debuted, and now it's over 1 million listing. So this is a thing that basically got people looking at comics, investigating comics, and the guy who put it together, Bob Overstreet, was such a fan, and he created this thing that said, look, comics are worth more than just comics are worth money. But also, because they're worth money, they made people look at them who wouldn't normally look at them, and then they were like, wait a minute, they're worth money, but they're not worth money in the sense of their currency. They're also worth money in the sense that they're entertainment.
Yes.
It's a value. It's like you read a Action Comics #1. It's not just good because you're thinking, oh, I'm going to make money from this. It's good because you read it, and it's got this wealth of excitement. You have the superheroes, you have Superman, or if you're reading Marvel, you have those unique changes, the way that some comic companies tend to lighten up over the years or darken up with their themes, the way things become more complex, and sometimes sub-stories become lighter or more youthful, trying to hit all kinds of markets, the way that the whole medium has changed, and how just this incredible value. And the thing that's interesting is they say there are two American art forms, jazz and comic books. And we all talk about manga, and we all love manga,
Yeah.
because I have to say, if there's one culture right now that is really delivering for my aesthetic appreciation, and I'm just speaking on my own terms, very good narratives. I'm very appreciative of the Japanese and the Asian markets, particularly mangas, because these are stories that are complex and deal with all kinds of interesting things. And in fact, manga became popular because of World War II. GIs were bringing comics over at the time, and Japan saw these books and immediately responded to them and created their own.
Wow.
And I mean, the cross-pollination is wonderful because there's a different cultures are all different, and there's a different way of living one's life in one place than there is in another. So when you see a story format that was from where you grew up, and then you see it as relayed back to you from another culture, like whether you go and see Speed Racer as an anime, or even to make it more like if you go and see The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's an Italian reimagining of an American Western.
Oh, yeah.
And it's that there's little differences that make something that's so familiar seem fresh.
Oh yeah, being former military, I can definitely stress how big comics were for me. As both kid, being a military brat and being in the military myself, when you're traveling so much, you're having to make new friends. So my friend were comic books. They were the constant. If I was in this place and I would not see that friend anymore, and I'd go to this other place, I would see a comic book on there. Oh, here's the next Adventures of Superman, and especially with manga as well. I'm a little bit younger than you guys, and how manga has really started to step up along with anime. How much they are influencing people of my generation. They're that constant. When you're going from one place to place, you can always count on the next issue of Superman or Dragon Ball
And
Z.
your old friend will be there waiting.
They'll be there waiting for you.
And on top of that, it not only creates, you obviously have a friend, but you have a touchstone in which to make new friends.
Oh yeah.
Indeed.
It's like I pick up a copy of MPD Psycho, and I start reading it, and I say, wow, this is great, and I type a review on Amazon.com, and then somebody writes back and says, I'm a big Takashi Miike fan. I read the comic as well. I thought these were differences. I read Takashi Miike too. I like him too. And this is, that's not a comic book artist, but it's an artist or director who pulls a lot of his movies from comic.
One of my pleasures has been to have come through the museum and tape a show for my program, Fantastic Forum.
That was a very good show.
Well, thank you. That was a special. It deviated from the typical thing that we do, which is primarily a panel discussion. We have interviews and features. So I would love to be able to come back or to get you as a guest on the show.
We'd love to have you. I'd love to be on the show.
Yeah, we do panel discussion. I do interviews. In fact, I've gotten such notables as Neil Adams, Howard Chaykin, Frank Cho we've had on the show, Matt Wagner, Jim Shooter. In fact, did a really good interview with him about creators' rights, which is a passion of mine.
Wow,
So,
yes.
I try to get a lot of people who are relevant in the comics industry with something to say, because we talk about everything from frivolous stuff like, who's stronger, Superman or the Hulk, to, serious issues like the creators' rights sort of thing. And also, Patrick is an incredible creator, comic artist, writer, and does a show of his own, at least one.
Yeah, I used to write and publish comic books. Used to attend Baltimore Comic Con, and I now have taken a lot of my filmmaking into working on a comic book show, pop culture show, much like the amazing Fantastic Forum, which I strongly suggest you all check out, called Bam Kapow, with my fellow hosts Toya Chisholm, Troy Soul Edler, and LD White, and we're produced by the great C. Lorenzo Johnson, another fellow comics creator. We do much of the same that Fantastic Forum does, and would love to take our show here. This is an amazing museum, and
I would love to
I'm very
have you.
appreciative that you allowed us to come and check this place out.
Well, we're very happy that we have two enthusiastic fans to come to this museum. I mean, we appreciate that somebody, not just somebody, two individuals that really care about these materials would come in and are excited about it, because that tells us that we're doing our job.
Yeah.
If somebody comes in, it's like, it's great if you know, it's great if you don't know, but it's better if we get somebody that loves this stuff, because if we can put a smile on their face, we're doing it right.
Well, you've done it. I have a permanent one today. It's going to be hard to erase this.
Well, that just sort of brings me to something, though, because the collector's market we were talking about a little bit earlier, and one thing that I've noticed is you find a lot of people who don't necessarily know comics, but they take a very speculative view of it. And so every time there's a new #1, in fact, I remember at the store where I shop in Washington, D.C., when Obama was elected, there was a Spider-Man issue, and they went through like 6 printings. And people are snapping these things up, and I had to say, hey, that's never going to be worth anything, because they've done 6 printings already. It's the relative scarcity of these things. I mean, Action Comics #1 wouldn't be worth anything but for the fact that everybody's mother threw all of them out, except for the ones that were squirreled away in somebody's attic somewhere.
Which is why it's comic destruction by mothers. We've actually asked the mothers of America to secretly steal into their children's basements, grab all of their comics, and incinerate them. Please don't try to throw them in the water, cover from the covers, don't do any small tears, damage, destroy them completely. And that will bring my comic collection.
Increase the value overnight, no doubt.
We're joking, of course.
We're having so much fun, but we have to go to a break. So you stay right where you are, and we'll be right.
The house is entered up a short set of wooden stairs to the first room, the parlor. With a fireplace for warmth in the winter, this room would have been furnished modestly and primarily used to greet guests, and for small...
Well, welcome back. We are here at Jeppy's Entertainment Museum in Baltimore's Inner Harbor at Camden Station, and Patrick and I are joined for this segment by Andy Hirschberger. Andy is the Associate Curator here at Jeppy's. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bless the Lord.
Well, this is a
family and social gatherings. The floors, walls, and mantel are all original to the house and would be familiar to Edgar today. Through a small door to the rear of the parlor are 2 steps that lead down to the kitchen. This room was extended about 5 feet in the 1930s, so would have been far smaller than it is today. In a simple but crowded household such as this, furnishings would have probably been limited to a small table for preparing food, and perhaps a chest or cabinet for storing cooking and eating utensils, and perhaps a chair. A kitchen of this size, with a hearth, would have been used strictly for cooking and laundry. In the heat of summer, cooking and laundry may have taken place just outside the door, in a small yard, perhaps under a canvas cover. In winter, the heat from the fire here would find its way up the winding staircase, delivering some comfort to the bedrooms above. The stairway to the second floor is narrow and winding, with a small landing at the top, which separates 3 distinct bedroom areas. No record exists of who slept in which room in this tiny house. Morals and polite society of the 1830s would dictate that Edgar and perhaps his cousin Henry would have slept in the same room while the women of the household occupied the other spaces. Turning left or east at the top of the stairs is a bedroom with a slanting ceiling, following the roof line at the rear of the home. While small, it could easily accommodate a couple of beds, along with some simple furnishings. 2 windows allow for light and ventilation, and look out over the narrow alley beside the house to the north. There is no fireplace in this room, relying instead on whatever heat was allowed to rise up the stairs. Across the staircase landing is the largest bedroom. This room has its own fireplace with 2 windows looking west over Amity Street in front. Poor families like the Clems weren't able to afford fine furnishings, and often relied on inherited furniture or simply made functional pieces. With 5 people living in such a small dwelling, large furniture would have taken up valuable living space. The plaster walls follow the roof line of the main house, and a single dormer window facing west over Amity Street is all there is for light and ventilation. With no insulation, this small room would have been blistering hot during the Baltimore summers. With only the rising heat of the fireplace in the bedroom below, it would have been quite cold in winter. Accepting a new job as editor of the periodical Southern Literary Messenger, Edgar Allan Poe left this house in August or September of 1835, moving to Richmond, Virginia. About the same time, Elizabeth Cairns Poe died, and her pension came to an end. Maria Clem was quickly unable to cover the rent, and had to move from this house on Amity Street. Edgar's cousin, Nielsen Poe, who lived in Baltimore, offered to take in both Maria and her daughter, Virginia. It seems Edgar feared the loss of his little family, and having fallen in love with his cousin, Virginia, who lived with him in the house, he married her, and both Maria Clem and his new bride moved to Richmond to be with Edgar. The house stands today as a monument and a shrine to Edgar Allan Poe's legacy in Baltimore. It is marvelously preserved, with much of its original fabric still intact. Were Edgar to walk across the threshold today, he would feel quite at home.
And we've been having such a good time here with Andy at Jeppy's Entertainment Museum. Andy, do you have any last thoughts?
Well, I'd just like to invite everybody in the viewing audience to come to our museum whenever you get a chance.
Andy, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, no problem.
And that's-
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for today. I'm Ulysses Campbell.
I'm Patrick Michael Strange.
And I'm Andy Hirschberger, Associate Curator, Registrar of Jeppy's Entertainment Museum.
And we'll see you next time.